Aviation travel, even under optimal circumstances, presents its own catalog of inconveniences and discomforts. The cramped seating configurations compress passengers into uncomfortable positions, crying infants create an inescapable soundtrack, and fellow travelers inevitably collide with you during their urgent pilgrimages to the lavatory facilities. However, these mundane irritations pale in comparison to the genuinely terrifying ordeals that have unfolded in the stratosphere, transforming routine flights into airborne nightmares that make the offensive odor of someone's unwashed feet seem like a delightful aromatherapy session. Prepare yourself for a journey through some of aviation's most spine-chilling episodes that have occurred at cruising altitude. Our first tale involves an unexpected and decidedly unwelcome passenger manifest edition. During an Aeromexico domestic flight from Torreon to Mexico City in November 2016, what began as an ordinary travel experience rapidly transformed into a heart-stopping thriller when an unregistered piece of living cargo made its dramatic debut mid-flight. Passenger Indalecio Medina was peacefully perusing his reading material when his fellow traveler suddenly gasped and gestured frantically toward the overhead storage compartments. In a scenario that could have been lifted directly from Samuel L. Jackson's cinematic masterpiece, Snakes on a Plane, a 3-foot venomous emerald viper began undulating menacingly along the luggage compartment before dramatically descending into the passenger aisle and weaving between the seat rows. Terror-stricken passengers immediately unbuckled their restraints and scrambled to safety, while flight attendants heroically deployed blankets as makeshift containment tools, and several quick-witted travelers successfully trapped the serpentine intruder between rows 5 and 6 before any passengers sustained bite injuries. The flight captain immediately established radio communication with ground control, secured emergency landing priority, and successfully touched down at Mexico City International Airport approximately 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Despite successfully containing the reptilian stowaway, evacuation protocols dictated that all passengers exit through the aircraft's rear door, while specialized animal control personnel boarded to safely remove the scaly infiltrator. Aeromexico subsequently launched a comprehensive investigation into how this creature managed to breach cabin security, though their findings were never released to the general public. One aspect remained abundantly clear. Every passenger received exemplary service treatment, as the Serpent enjoyed multiple blanket accommodations, expedited arrival scheduling, and a personal security escort upon deplaning. Samuel L. Jackson's fictional thriller had nothing on this real-life reptilian drama. Picture yourself leisurely observing cloud formations through your smartphone camera when you casually glance toward the engine and experience that stomach-dropping sensation of impending disaster. A dramatic photograph from 2008 captured a commercial aircraft with its nacelle panels catastrophically peeled backward during flight. And while that image appears genuinely alarming, it represents merely a preview compared to the harrowing incident that unfolded in February 2021. Within minutes of departing Denver International Airport bound for Hawaiian destinations, a thunderous explosion echoed from the starboard engine assembly, causing the entire aircraft to violently shudder and begin an uncontrolled altitude loss. Waves of panic swept through the passenger cabin as some travelers desperately tucked identification documents into their clothing pockets to assist with potential body identification should catastrophe strike. The terrifying view through the starboard windows provided the horrifying answer to everyone's unspoken fears. The engine was engulfed in flames and completely stripped of its protective cowling. The flight crew announced an immediate emergency return to Denver following apparent catastrophic engine failure, and through miraculous circumstances, all 241 souls aboard successfully evacuated without sustaining injuries. Unfortunately, the same fortunate outcome could not be extended to several residential properties in Broomfield, Colorado. When the engine violently expelled its massive outer ring assembly, gravitational forces sent the enormous circular casing plummeting earthward like a deadly metallic frisbee. While smaller debris fragments disintegrated upon ground impact, the primary ring structure landed virtually intact directly in homeowner Kirby Clements' front yard, who initially assumed a neighbor's trampoline had somehow vaulted over his property fence. Another unfortunate resident was preparing a meal when falling debris violently penetrated his kitchen ceiling, instantly eliminating any appetite for lunch. Regarding the initial catalyst that triggered this catastrophic sequence of events, the airline maintained complete silence. The most probable explanations included catastrophic failure of rotating internal components such as fan or turbine blades piercing the protective housing, or the extremely unfortunate ingestion of avian wildlife. Regardless of the root cause, fortune smiled favorably upon the 241 human passengers aboard that aircraft. Consider the silent terror associated with executing a dead stick landing procedure. In September 2016, recreational pilot Mark Pinnell was enjoying a leisurely flight in his RANS S-10 Sakota aircraft over Camillus, New York, when his single-engine propeller-driven aircraft suddenly ceased to possess a functioning propeller assembly. Professional training instincts immediately activated as he configured the aircraft for optimal gliding performance, focusing intently on nearby Weedsport Airport to calculate whether his current altitude would provide sufficient distance for a successful approach. Remarkably, he remained unaware that his propeller had completely separated from the aircraft, instead suspecting potential engine or propeller control system malfunctions while repeatedly attempting restart procedures, even though the engine continued operating uselessly without propeller blades to generate forward thrust. Only after executing a textbook emergency gliding approach and successful runway rollout did he step back and observe the completely bare propeller spinner assembly. The probable cause of this mechanical failure stemmed from his admission that he had not properly torqued the mounting bolts to manufacturer specifications when installing the propeller, a potentially fatal oversight he acknowledged with considerable embarrassment. Despite extensive ground searches for the wayward propeller blades, they were never recovered, hopefully avoiding any dangerous encounters with unsuspecting individuals below. Fire incidents on airport grounds generate significant concern, but cabin fires represent genuine existential threats to passenger survival. In July 2018, Anthony Carrio's vacation flight from Barcelona to Ibiza began generating literal sparks before aircraft pushback when a mobile phone connected to a portable power bank suddenly burst into flames at aisle level. True to our contemporary social media culture, he instinctively began filming the incident while simultaneously grabbing a water cup to extinguish the flames before the lithium battery cells could enter catastrophic thermal runaway conditions. The entire cabin underwent emergency evacuation procedures, and Anthony subsequently posted the dramatic footage along with a celebratory evacuation slide selfie. The airline, demonstrating considerably less amusement, issued stern reminders that portable power banks should remain switched off or properly packed to prevent accidental contact with metallic objects. These safety regulations exist for compelling scientific reasons. Lithium-ion battery packs function as chemical pressure vessels containing volatile electrolytes separated by extremely thin membrane barriers. Physical damage, compression forces, or manufacturing defects can puncture these protective barriers, trigger electrical short circuits, and unleash thermal energy rapidly enough to ignite battery cells and surrounding materials. This knowledge provides sufficient motivation for most travelers to complete all charging activities before boarding procedures. Since you've invested time in reading this content, consider this your friendly reminder to subscribe to the Hidden World of Flights channel to ensure you don't miss our upcoming detailed investigations. Occasionally, however, terror manifests in human form rather than mechanical failure. In October 2009, a Northwest Airlines flight traveling from Minneapolis to Detroit carried a self-proclaimed psychic passenger who decided to announce loudly and repeatedly that the aircraft would inevitably crash and all occupants would perish. Flight attendant Mr. Curse, a Reddit user, attempted to relocate her to a quieter cabin section, but the aircraft soon encountered severe turbulence that launched beverages, popped overhead storage compartments, and sent luggage crashing down in an eerily prophetic echo of her dire predictions. Detroit finally appeared through the aircraft windows, but the runway surface was covered with treacherous ice conditions that caused the aircraft to touch down and slide laterally while passengers screamed in terror until the aircraft finally skidded to a complete stop. The cabin immediately erupted in enthusiastic applause. Airport security promptly detained the psychic passenger, and Mr. Curse, thoroughly traumatized by the experience, submitted his resignation immediately after the final passenger deplaned. Whether the true horror stemmed from the near-catastrophic landing or the chorus of touchdown applause remains a subject of ongoing debate. Finally, we present a harrowing encounter with vertigo in active combat theater operations. In 1997, a military pilot posting under the username former F-16 was conducting flight operations in Middle Eastern airspace during Operation Southern Watch, participating in a 2-aircraft patrol mission scheduled for an 11 p.m. departure. Mission briefing and pre-flight aircraft inspection procedures proceeded without incident until the critical moment arrived to align the inertial navigation system, commonly abbreviated as INS, which serves as the aircraft's computational brain that continuously calculates precise position, heading, and velocity data without requiring external signal sources. When properly configured, this sophisticated system transforms the physical world into mathematical equations and maintains navigational accuracy in complete darkness conditions. During the critical aircraft positioning input phase, he accidentally entered incorrect hemisphere coordinates, inputting western longitude instead of eastern coordinates. The sophisticated INS system accepted this erroneous data without generating error warnings. But such fundamental coordinate mismatches create potentially catastrophic scenarios where the aircraft's gyroscopic systems would actively combat physical reality during acceleration phases, potentially causing the aircraft to enter dangerous stall conditions because the computed aircraft attitude would fundamentally conflict with actual spatial orientation. Former F-16 immediately recognized this critical error and, fortunately benefiting from a series of unrelated operational delays, possessed sufficient ground time to properly realign the navigation system according to correct specifications. Following 2 additional hours of preparation, they successfully launched into smooth flight conditions until penetrating a menacing wall of severe weather formations around 2,000 feet altitude, causing the recently corrected INS system to experience catastrophic failure and completely dump all navigational coordinate data. Now climbing at approximately 45 degrees angle with absolutely zero external visibility references and his primary navigation computer effectively rendered useless, he confronted a terrifying decision matrix. Continue aggressive climb profiles through the meteorological hazards hoping to emerge above the weather layer, or manually fly the departure procedure using only the backup attitude indicator, a simple mechanical instrument that provides basic spatial orientation information while trusting pre-flight briefing data. He selected manual flight using the traditional needle and ball instruments. However, twilight rapidly transitioned into complete darkness, and the dimly illuminated cockpit environment made the tiny instrument references extremely difficult to interpret accurately. The initial indication that his flight path was deviating dangerously from intended trajectory manifested as intensifying wind noise pitch as aerodynamic airflow over the aircraft structure dramatically increased. Experiencing complete spatial disorientation, he lost all comprehension of vertical orientation or accurate altitude awareness. Military training protocols suggested the appropriate response: emergency ejection procedures. He adamantly refused to surrender control. Reaching desperately behind his seat, he activated every available floodlight and instrument panel illumination his fingers could locate. The cockpit suddenly blazed with brilliant illumination, bringing the backup attitude gauge into crystal clear visibility. And his stomach plummeted with horrifying realization that his spatial orientation was catastrophically incorrect by nearly 170 degrees, with the aircraft nose pitched directly toward terrestrial impact. In split-second mental calculations, he desperately attempted to exchange sufficient altitude for safe recovery trajectory without applying excessive control inputs that would cause loss of consciousness under extreme gravitational forces. He carefully modulated then increased control pressure, gradually guiding the aircraft toward level flight attitude. According to his rapid mathematical estimations, wings level flight would occur around 1,500 feet above ground level, providing substantial safety margins, until external visual confirmation revealed a terrifying alternative reality. Terrain was rapidly approaching at dangerous closure rates. His mathematical calculations were fundamentally flawed. Rather than achieving level flight 1,500 feet above Earth's surface, he was trajectory bound to achieve level flight 500 feet below ground level. With ground impact imminent and insufficient time for ejection procedures, he committed to maximum effort recovery, closing his eyes tightly, advancing throttles to full afterburner power, and executing one decisive control input while mentally bidding farewell to his spouse. Several eternal moments later, positive climb rate indicators returned. Opening his eyes cautiously, he realized terrain clearance occurred by impossibly narrow margins, approximately 20 feet separation distance. Thoroughly shaken yet amazed by survival, he climbed through weather conditions, properly reset INS coordinates, and successfully rejoined his wingman aircraft. Radio communication conveyed the near-catastrophic incident details, prompting his flight partner to dryly observe that airborne incidents remain confidential between aircrew members. Upon base return, however, ground personnel reported witnessing afterburner illumination scorching desert terrain and flagged the incident as potential weapons impact. Despite investigation, former F-16 departed with minimal disciplinary action and presumably requiring fresh flight suit replacements. Consider smoke manifestation in the most undesirable location possible. During March 2018, WestJet Flight 3161 approached within 5 minutes of Nanaimo destination when mysterious gray atmospheric contamination began infiltrating throughout passenger cabin areas. A vigilant passenger immediately notified flight attendant personnel, who established cockpit communication protocols while agonizing minutes elapsed as everyone inhaled acrid atmospheric contamination while counting remaining seconds until touchdown completion. Official announcements finally referenced emergency landing procedures, escalating passenger tension levels significantly. Following aircraft ground stop, urgency protocols remained fully activated as ground crews expedited passenger movement onto closed runway surfaces, while emergency response teams arrived for comprehensive situation assessment, and paramedical personnel evaluated all occupants aboard. Fortunately, despite frayed psychological states and respiratory irritation symptoms, no passengers sustained serious medical injuries. Several travelers questioned why overhead oxygen mask systems failed to deploy automatically, prompting WestJet explanations that this particular aircraft model, certified exclusively for maximum altitude operations around 25,000 feet, was not mandated to carry such equipment, as oxygen masks are specifically designed for high-altitude decompression emergencies, where atmospheric density decreases dramatically. Such technical explanations provide minimal psychological comfort when inhaling unidentified smoke contamination, and the airline's subsequent investigation findings were never released publicly. The undeniable truth remains straightforward. Being trapped inside metallic aircraft structures while they fill with toxic fumes represents genuine nightmare scenarios that no passenger aboard that flight desires to experience again. Weather-delivered destruction presents another category of aviation terror. Initial photographic evidence of the severely damaged American Airlines aircraft suggests nose-first ground impact, but the actual devastation originated from above. In June 2018, passenger Jesus Esparza boarded Flight 1897 from San Antonio to Phoenix anticipating routine travel. Instead, immediately following departure, the aircraft encountered massive thunderstorm formations. Hailstones bombarded the fuselage like artillery projectiles. Lightning created strobing illumination beyond window surfaces. Infants wailed continuously, and the passenger seated behind Jesus succumbed to motion sickness symptoms. Violent downdraft forces then violently displaced the aircraft, launching unsecured items toward ceiling surfaces. Following seemingly endless minutes of meteorological punishment, they successfully escaped the storm cell. The flight captain declared emergency status and diverted to El Paso for damage assessment. A significant understatement considering the aircraft's radome was completely destroyed, and windshield suffered such extensive spiderweb cracking that pilots were essentially operating through instrument navigation and minimal visual references. They achieved successful ground contact with all 135 occupants safely evacuating. Despite positive outcomes, Jesus confirmed that observing the aircraft's obliterated nose section convinced him to suspend travel activities indefinitely, a completely understandable reaction. Another harrowing tale concludes with relief only during final moments: landing gear malfunction scenarios. A flight attendant, sister of Reddit user Acacia Wildwood, was conducting routine early 2000 service on a Hawaii to California route when cockpit personnel discovered landing gear extension failure. The crew initiated fuel-burning holding patterns while fire and rescue services positioned below, and an onboard flight mechanic seated forward met the attendant's gaze with a subtle, ominous head gesture indicating unfavorable survival probabilities. The physics governing belly landing impacts can generate brutal force transmission through human bodies and aircraft structures alike. As runway approach commenced, cabin crew commanded brace position adoption. She executed training protocols while mentally accepting she would never reunite with family members again. Until suddenly, with runway contact mere seconds away, the landing gear mechanism activated and locked into position. Successful touchdown on wheels occurred with all passengers safely deplaning. The following morning, instinctive dread suggested avoiding the return flight segment, but her husband wisely observed that succumbing to fear might permanently ground her aviation career. She continued flying and maintained active service for an additional 15 years. Such experiences demonstrate what confronting and conquering terror truly represents. If you believe previous accounts have desensitized your emotional responses, attempt to mentally erase this scenario. During June 2019, en route from Kosovo to Switzerland, severe atmospheric turbulence suddenly ambushed passenger cabin areas approximately 30 minutes into the journey. Anticipating rough air conditions, a flight attendant had begun beverage collection procedures when unexpected vertical descent forces launched her against ceiling surfaces. Service trays tumbled wildly, passengers screamed and sobbed uncontrollably, and scalding water from service equipment splashed onto Mirjeta Basha's spouse, causing significant burn injuries. Throughout the entire ordeal, flight crew members maintained steady vocal reassurance, promising conditions would improve, and their predictions proved accurate. Upon Basel arrival, ground teams had already positioned emergency services for immediate response capability.